Hey gardeners, Amy here with Garden Up. Today I want to talk about this lovely weed right here, Hypericum perforatum. So Hypericum perforatum, common name is St. John's wort. It's a very useful plant in medicine and herbalism, but if you don't know what you're doing with it, I would use caution. It is very dangerous to livestock, and in the areas where it's not native, it has become invasive and it's on a lot of noxious weed lists. So check your area's noxious weed list to see if it's on there. And if it is, you'll want to get rid of it. Its uses in herbalism is why humans have brought it all over the world to begin with. But again, it's escaped cultivation and it can present a large problem in its non-native ecosystems. It's native to Eurasia and North Africa, but humans have brought it all over the world, where it has escaped cultivation and started to cause many, many problems. There are some biocontrols that have been released, which is pretty cool. There's a little beetle that we call the St. John's wort beetle. It's a little tiny black, but also kind of metallic, shiny beetle that you might see on the flowers sometimes. So if you happen to see those, great, they're doing their job. It's very useful because if not kept in check, this thing will go crazy. So we're going to have to be careful today when we remove this because it has already gone to seed. It's probably dropped most of its seeds, but we're going to try to catch as many as we can so that we don't make the problem worse. And then we will have to keep an eye on this area for a while to dig up any seedlings that come up later. Okay, as with most weeds, when I come to dig it, I want to come out just a little bit past the farthest runner root. This does have underground runner roots called rhizomes. I am hitting landscape fabric, so that's going to be loads of fun. Okay, so these little guys are really fragile right now. It is currently mid-March when we're digging this up, so I imagine they're going to break really easily because these tender new stems are just emerging. But what I'm after is the roots. It has a perennial root system. A Hypericum perforatum is an herbaceous perennial, which means the top dies back, but the roots persist. So you have to get the whole root in order to get the plant. So this is a good example of runner roots and why they can be so problematic. The roots have gone way past where the visible growth was. And look how long this is, and this is just a little fragment of it. This was just growing along the surface of the landscape fabric that's underneath here, which is yet another reason why I can't stand landscape fabric. There, how about that? So from the main plant, it has gone this far out so far, and that's just what I found. To identify this plant, there's a few things that I look for. The first and most obvious is actually this peppering pattern underneath the leaves. If you take a leaf and you hold it up to the sun and look from the underside into the light, you'll see these little spots. These white and often black spots. I'm not actually seeing very many of the black spots on this plant, but usually both are present. St. John's wort is in the family Hypericaceae. It is in USDA zone 3 to 8. Its height is about 1 to 3 feet, and its spread is just under 1 foot to about 2 feet wide. It blooms from June to August. It's a hairless perennial herb with woody roots, yellow flowers marked by black glands, and leaves that appear perforated due to translucent glands. They produce thousands of seeds per plant. Each plant may produce an average of 15,000 to 34,000 seeds and may produce many, many more than that. It has leaves that attach on opposite sides of the stems without a stalk. The leaves vary in shape from being very narrow, linear, to a rounded oval slightly wider at the base, elliptic. This is typically what you'll see is the elliptic shape. Or you might even see it be narrow with the widest portion towards the end of the leaf, like a reverse elliptic, but still long and narrow. This is called oblanceolate. The leaves are yellow-green in color with scattered translucent dots of glandular tissue. The dots are clearly visible when held up to the light, giving the leaves a perforated appearance. The edges or the margins of the leaves usually have scattered black dots as well, often called dark glands, though sometimes they will appear away from the edges. The leaves are opposite in orientation, and there's often a growth node at the base of each leaf, so there's usually a little sprout of more leaves right between the leaf and the stem. The leaves also often have a red blotching to them, but that's not always present. The next thing I look for is at the basal growth, there's usually a very red tinge to it. It's like white with red, the growth right here at the bottom. And then the roots are white or yellow and very zigzaggy, and you just have to follow this whole root and get the whole thing. And this is another example of a plant that you have to dig and then sit and wait for a while. Let the area sit and rest, water it, and wait for stuff to come up, because any root fragments that you missed will likely regrow, and then you'll know where to dig to get those out. And if it is ever seeded, you're going to have to keep an eye on it for several years to make sure that it doesn't seed and none of those seeds germinate and grow into new plants. And then in the winter, these seed heads persist. There's always the skeleton of this plant, and there's these big seed heads left over from the flowers. The flowers have 5 petals. They're quite pretty. They're almost always yellow, and they really are striking. They're very nice. And then the fruits turn into these like little balls. Now, there are several ornamental varieties of this plant, and they are not supposed to spread. I've never seen them spread. That doesn't mean it won't happen, but they have often different colored flowers. They also may have perennial branches instead of herbaceous branches that die all the way back. Some of them are more like a bush, and the flowers come in many different colors. And then the pods, the seed pods that the flowers turn into, are very pretty and very striking in color. They can be a bright pink or a vivid orange, even shades of white. They're very, very pretty. And so the landscape varieties of this plant, I do have a couple in my own yard. I love them. I don't think those ones are medicinal, but they're also not going to cause a problem by escaping, at least not yet. So if you do want to have a St. John's wort in your yard, make sure it is a landscape variety that is sterile and won't spread. Don't buy this one. I don't think you could buy this one, honestly, but it shouldn't be legal as it's in the noxious weed list, but other things are sold, so who knows. The beetles are metallic bronze green colored, and they typically measure about 5 to 6 millimeters long. The adults emerge in early June and begin feeding in clusters on young terminal leaves, flower buds, or the undersides of leaves. They continue to feed until leaf drop in July and early August. They go into a dormant period, but they may break dormancy and have a second mating season if the weather conditions are right, but otherwise they tend to reemerge to mate and lay eggs in the following spring. Females oviposit up to 2,000 eggs, either individually or in small clusters, onto basal winter foliage. The eggs overwinter and hatch into larvae, which feed on the spring foliage. Mature larvae burrow into the soil during the late spring and early summer to create a pupal cell. Early spring larval feedings on fleshy new growth cause the most damage to the plant. This is the best for controlling the plant if you're trying to reduce its population. This timing is the controlling key. Although adult feeding can be impressive, it has less of an impact than the larvae feeding. Heavy fall feeding may cause some impact on the plant's ability to overwinter. In the USA, St. John's wort infestations were reduced by 97% at many sites. I want to say one more thing, too, about the St. John's wort beetle. The St. John's wort beetle is a biocontrol, and this is one that was done well. So humans have this bad habit of bringing species of all different types, plants, animals, insects, all kinds of things, all over the world. And we tended in the past to do this without any thought or care of the consequences, which is why we now have hundreds of invasive species all over the world. Stuff was brought from Asia and Europe over to the United States, and stuff was brought from the United States to Asia and Europe and Africa and back and forth. And now plants from all of these different continents are wreaking havoc on the continents where they don't belong. Same with insects and certain mammals. So, in the past, humans have brought other biocontrols to try to control the problem they first brought, and often the new biocontrol causes more problems than the original invasive species that the biocontrol was brought in to control. The St. John's wort beetle is not that. The St. John's wort beetle was heavily researched for years before it was ever released into North America, and it worked. It started to reduce the populations of St. John's wort and start to get them under control, because St. John's wort is a weed that has very little controls over here in the North American side of the world. Nothing eats it. So the St. John's wort beetle, which relies on that plant and that plant only, is the control that made the difference. It started to level the playing field so St. John's wort didn't kill off all the natives by outcompeting it. All right, now, since this has already gone to seed, for the sake of not spreading these seeds any farther, I'm going to first cut down the skeletons and try to gently collect them in the bucket. And then the bucket is going to get dumped straight into a garbage can. Do not put these in your compost. Do not spread them to a wild dump site. Nothing of the sort. You will still drop some seeds just because that's the nature of the thing, but the more we can collect and not spread, the better, in my opinion. That makes a lot less work later. Common names for this plant include St. John's wort, but also perforate St. John's wort or common St. John's wort, also goatweed, klamathweed, tiptonweed, or Rosin-Rose. Each of these common names has its own unique history, so if you want to look into where those words came from, definitely do a little bit of research on it. It's really quite fascinating. So this is a bed that's like off in the corner of this client's yard. It was originally, when the house was built, this was landscaped with fabric and rock mulch. Now, as you can see, the fabric and rock mulch is totally doing its job by making a big mess, but we're going to see if the fabric did its job by keeping most of the St. John's wort roots up above the soil level. So part of what we're doing today is clearing this out to put in a pollinator garden, which means the fabric's gotta go anyway. We're sorting out the rocks so that we can use them decoratively or dispose of them. It's going to be a slow and tedious job, but the St. John's wort absolutely has to go completely. So what I'm going to do is tear up the fabric and see if the St. John's wort comes with it. Nope, there's a root right there. See all these roots? Some of these are tree roots, but that one is definitely not. That is St. John's wort, so this fabric did not do its job. Shocker. Okay, this is underneath. Okay. This is why I hate landscape fabric. I would just like to take this moment to point out how much and why I hate landscape fabric. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope this was valuable to you. If you liked it, please make sure to hit the like button. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so you get more quality gardening content in your video feed every week. Thanks so much, guys. See you in the garden.